On June 14th, Cumberland County, Pennsylvania officers received a call from an anonymous individual claiming that a local artist by the name of Jeremy Pauley had what they described as buckets of blood, skin, and organs in their basement. Police executed a search warrant on Pauley's home, and in the basement discovered around 5 buckets of human remains. Pauley was a self-proclaimed collector of oddities, and even owned 2 complete skeletons, around 10 human skulls, specimens in jars, and more, and all he says have been obtained legally. However, these buckets of body parts were another story, as police were able to determine that Pauley had purchased them from a woman by the name of Candace Scott from Arkansas for around $4,000. It was also determined that she had stolen them from a nearby morgue belonging to the University of Arkansas. These parts included, according to Kicker 102.5, 1 half of a human head, 1 whole human head, 3 brains, 1 heart, 1 liver, 1 lung, 2 kidneys, 1 full female pelvis, skin, and 4 hands. All were shipped to the United States Postal Service. Pauley, who has been known to use blood in his artwork, would admit that he was intending to use these, not in his artwork, but for monetary gain. As a result, he was charged with abuse of a corpse, receiving stolen property, both as a felony and misdemeanor, and a felony count of dealing in proceeds of unlawful activities. Pauley has been released on a $50,000 bail, and although I searched heavily, I could not find any information regarding Candace and any possible arrests. Pauley has had notable success with his artwork, with several pieces ending up in macabre museums around the nation. The preliminary hearing for Pauley has been set to January 11th, 2023. On November 14th, 4 University of Idaho students were found dead in a home located in Moscow, Idaho. Although initially police did not identify how the 4 students had died, in recent reports, police have determined that they were ultimately stabbed to death. They would state that they believed it to be a murder. The 4 victims would be identified as Madison Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Xana's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. The 3 former mentioned victims lived in the home as roommates, but also shared the home with 2 other people who seemed to escape the grisly scene unharmed. Police believe that they were asleep during the killings, and have stated that they do not believe them to be involved or responsible for the stabbings. Police have tracked the victims' movements that night to several hotspots around Moscow, and feel confident in stating that they had arrived home around 1:45 a.m. on November 13th. Likewise, phone records show Kaylee had made several phone calls throughout the night, leading police to believe that the murders took place sometime after 3 a.m. Despite this, however, police have not been able to identify the killer, or find the weapon used. The police chief says that he has received over 16,000 tips about the murders, and interestingly enough, reportedly hundreds regarding a stalker Kaylee may have had. They have ultimately been unable to identify or even verify these claims, however. In the past month, police have interviewed hundreds of individuals and cleared many of suspicion, including the roommates, previous tenants, friends, people spotted on camera, and even the owner of a car located nearby that belonged to a woman from Colorado. Although they lack a suspect, they still believe this to be what they had described as a targeted attack, following up by stating that they believe at least one of the individuals slain was, quote, undoubtedly targeted, although they have not specified to the news or the families what exactly they meant by that. The police have also stated that they are 100% committed to solving this crime, but don't just want a suspect, they also want a conviction, and urged anyone with evidence to contact 208-883-7180. Shinzo Abe was the former Prime Minister of Japan, and the longest elected one at that, having served as Prime Minister longer than anyone else. However, on July 8, 2022, while giving a speech to help support a fellow member of his party, Abe would be assassinated. The 41-year-old man, named Tetsuya Yamagami, managed to craft a homemade weapon and slip past Abe's security and fire 2 shots at the former Prime Minister. The first shot would fail, ultimately alerting Abe and resulting in him turning towards the attacker, at which point he would fire again, hitting Abe in the chest and neck, fatally striking him in the heart. By the time emergency services arrived, he was already showing no vital signs, but technically, only a medical professional can declare someone deceased in Japan, and after arriving at a nearby hospital and receiving a blood transfusion, he was pronounced dead at 5:03 p.m. that evening Despite the fact many world leaders came out and spoke on Abe's passing, he was actually a controversial figure, as he is believed to be the cause of deteriorating relations between Japan, China, and Korea, most notably for his denial of the Nanking Massacre and war crimes committed against Korea during Japan's occupation. He has also publicly visited shrines dedicated to known Class A war criminals as sitting Prime Minister. However, Tetsuya said he held no grudge against Abe for his political views, but instead for his connection to the Unification Church, a controversial church described by some as a cult that was founded in Korea but reportedly makes 70% of its income from Japan. One such way is by finding people with newly deceased family members and telling them something along the lines of, "Your loved one has contacted us, give us money if you want them to go to heaven." Tetsuya said his mother was brainwashed by the church, giving the equivalent of over $700,000 and even her home to the church, ultimately going bankrupt as a result. Initially, he aimed to assassinate Hakjan Han, the leader of the Unification Church, but after he found it too difficult, moved his sights to Abe, who he believes is responsible for spreading the movement to Japan since his family has a long-standing history with the group. On December 24th, only 4 days ago, it was determined that Tetsuya was mentally competent enough to stand trial for the murder of Shinzo Abe. The trial has yet to begin. On Halloween night, the streets of a section of South Korea's capital, popular with tourists and those seeking food, clubs, and bars, were packed with people looking to have a fun night out. However, soon a fun night out turned into a disaster as what is known as a crowd crush formed, resulting in the deaths of over 150 people. Some have estimated that due to the fact that a lot of people were celebrating the first Halloween after COVID restrictions were lowered, there may have been as much as double the number of people visiting the World Food Street this year than the year before, with police estimating around 100,000 people coming through the nearby metro station that night. The crowd was very densely packed, but according to some, was manageable, despite moving slowly. The police would receive a number of calls about the situation, but were ultimately unequipped to handle the crowd as thousands of officers were assigned to other areas of the capital. However, things would soon turn deadly just off the left side of the Hamilton Hotel, as those attempting to leave the popular street made their way through an alley. Although the alley in question is just shy of about 140 feet long, or 42 meters, the entrance is only about 23 feet wide, or 7 meters, and the exit less than 12 feet, or 3.6 meters. On top of this, the entire alley is on a downward grade, meaning as you enter you are walking down to the lower elevation, descending roughly 14 feet. At some point while passing through this alley, roughly around the middle, it is likely that the result of the densely packed crowd, someone or multiple people would begin to fall. As more and more people piled in slowly attempting to make their way through the alley, they were unknowingly sandwiching those in between those at the entrance and the fallen patrons, either causing them to fall or pushing into others themselves. While rescue crews and civilians attempted to rescue those in danger, they were met with a disturbing issue. Those who were on the bottom of the pile had so much weight on them that they were unable to pull them out, but those who were on top of the pile were too high to effectively remove either. Coupled with the fact that they needed to enter through the narrower entrance, making dispersing the crush a slow and ultimately deadly endeavor, as the lives of 158 people were claimed that night. Initially, there were rumors that a celebrity had been sighted at a nearby bar, and media outlets reported that the crush was a stampede of those attempting to get a glimpse of the celebrity, while others have theorized that the incident may be malicious, as a handful of videos have surfaced claiming to depict people at the end of the line shouting things like "push," leading some to believe that the crush was started intentionally. An official reason behind the disaster has yet to be announced, but the incident is still currently under investigation, and the government of South Korea has announced that they would be offering thousands of dollars in funeral expenses and compensation to the families of those victims. In addition, plans to further prevent similar tragedies have already been set in place. On May 24th, 2022, a gunman entered Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and claimed the lives of 19 students and 2 teachers, just about 2 days before the school year was set to end. While the story is incredibly tragic and devastating already, things would only explode to unprecedented proportions, as it was determined that the police officers had been on the scene for over an hour before the attacker was confronted. It was determined that the attacker had entered a classroom and remained inside it for the majority of the time spent inside the school. This would ultimately flood news feeds for days as people attempted to mourn the loss of victims, with various agencies making statements about their response and frequently having them contradicted by eyewitness accounts, testimonies, and surveillance footage. This of course coming at a time when police are already being heavily scrutinized as the result of prior events throughout the nation. Such contradictions included not having shields to protect the officers despite shields arriving upwards of an hour before the door is breached, officers stating that they believed no further lives were in danger despite receiving phone calls from survivors inside the classroom, officers fist bumping on camera, and most disturbingly, claiming they did not have the keys to enter the locked classroom, despite some reports claiming the door itself could not even be locked at all. It seems that whoever was in charge of the scene was the one preventing officers from entering the classroom, with one officer even being removed from the scene after learning his wife was in the classroom with the attacker, in order to prevent him from rushing in and attempting to engage the assailant. I have seen some reports that the border police officers were the ones who ultimately entered the classroom, killing the attacker, but may have done so on their own, as some have stated that the border patrol officers entered without permission from those in charge, just 2 minutes after the DPS captain gave the command for the breaching team to stand by. Despite this, they entered anyway, taking out the attacker, who was hiding in a closet and opened fire at the officers after a nearly 1 hour and 14-minute ordeal. This alleged incompetence of the police has resulted in the school police chief being fired, the city police chief retiring to avoid being fired, and other law enforcement officers also facing suspensions or terminations. It was ultimately decided to close the school permanently as a result of the attack, with plans for it to later be demolished. Well, that's it for now. Be sure to like the video to help the algorithm, and subscribe to see more content like it. If you enjoyed this video, why not check out this one, where I talk about 5 YouTubers who committed horrible crimes. I'll see you all in 2023.